about between the years 500 and 1000 AD. And it was told by the Old Norse peoples. And of course that would be up in northern, cold, dark Europe. And this story takes place in a mythical realm called Asgard. It was the realm of the Norse gods. So this happens this day. There's a young girl walking through the forest, and she had a basket of apples over her arm. And she wore a gossamer gown, which was sparkling, and it was later afternoon, so the lights were just, making the gossamer glow. And she had a long golden braid over her shoulder, about to her waist. And she wore a cloak, and she had a hooded cloak, and this hooded cloak was a brilliant color, burnt orange. So she's walking through the forest, but this is not any ordinary young girl. This is Iduna. She is the goddess of immortality, rejuvenation, and for eternal youth. And these apples she's carrying are not normal apples, they're golden apples. And these golden apples, whoever ate one would have eternal life or have or eternal youth and immortality. Well, what she was doing in the forest that day, she's walking through because she's going to Odin, who is the father of all the gods, his feast in the forest. And he does it every year, and the good gods, gather there. And so she goes and she brings every year, she brings an apple with immortality to Odin and to the other gods to keep them around. So she's walking along, and she comes to, and she meets her friend, Hakun. Hakun the Hunter is what he's called. And he has an enchanted axe. He's known for that. And they're good friends, so they talked, and he was going to go to the feast later too, so they talked about the feast and how wonderful it will be, and about the apples, and how, it's always so important to make sure that Odin and everybody gets them because of the eternal life thing. So anyway, they had a nice conversation, and then Hakun had to do some work in the forest before the feast, so he continued off down the way, and Iduna continued off down the path. Well, unbeknownst to them, they had been overheard this conversation, and they were overheard by Fenris, the wolf god. And Fenris was the product of Loki, the evil mischief god, and of a giantress, so he was a huge wolf, and very vicious, very evil. But the other thing about him was that he was also a shapeshifter. And if you think about it, and you know your fairy tales, and you know you're a shapeshifter that's a wolf is a werewolf. So this was this young, big old beast. So he had a plan. He was very interested in those golden apples, and especially since he wasn't invited to the feast. So he ran off parallel to the path and got way down, and he sat down and leaned up against a tree next to the path and shifted his shape into that of an elderly, frail-looking man. So Iduna didn't take too long. She came along, and there he was, by the road. And she said, "Oh, well, hello, good evening, sir." The old man didn't say anything. And she became a little concerned. She said, "Well, sir, are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you?" And the old man turned, he looked, and he said, "No, I'm fine." And so Iduna, kind of stepped back a little bit, thought, well, that was quite rude, but, I can't just leave him here. He might be hurt, he might need something. So she was trying to figure out what to do, and then she noticed that as he's sitting there, his hands are just like he can't even help himself. They're just reaching toward her and the golden apples. So Iduna says, "But sir, what grasping and brutal hands you have." And the old man says, "I need them for my work." And Iduna stepped back again. She said, "But sir, what guttural, snarling voice you had, and it's like a wild beast." He didn't say anything. And then she took another step backwards and said, "And your manner, sir, it is frightening, it is threatening." And then she's thinking, well, maybe she'll go on down the path. And as she's going down the path, she looks into his eyes, and then she gasps, and she says, "And your eyes, They are fiery and they're full of hate. Well, Fenris was immediately, knew his jig was up, so he turned back into the wolf and attacked Iduna and tried to struggle, tried to get the apples from her. And Iduna struggled mightily, but a good thing, Hakun had been working nearby, and he heard the struggle and he heard her call for help. So he rushed to her aid, and he took his enchanted axe and he hit the back of the wolf, and the wolf turned around to devour whoever was bothering him there. And when he turned around, Hakun hit him again on the arm and gashed his arm. And then Fenris recognized who this was, and he recognized that enchanted axe. And he turned and he ran as fast as he could, and Hakun watched him go for a little bit and stepped out in the path and took his enchanted axe and threw it. And that enchanted axe chased him and hacked him all the way down into the shadow world. So, well, and then Hakun helped Iduna gather up all her golden apples, and they looked down the path and they saw the fires of the feast that was already starting to begin. So we must hurry down there. And so they went together to the feast, and Iduna gave Odin and all the gods their apples of immortality. So, now this story is kind of a compilation. It was it's Norse mythology, I looked into that because I saw a lot of this on Wikipedia at first. So then I went to the Norse mythology books and read about Fenris and Iduna and the other gods. And then I saw the reference to Stan Lee in the Marvel comic books.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yes, and he had done his version of this story in the Marvel comic books. I believe it's 1990 something. I got a copy of one of the ones. And so anyway, it's kind of a compilation, but I thought it was very interesting that this story would have begun so long before the Brothers Grimm. So anyway.
But as Grimm